Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. Now in this video I'm going to be discussing Chapter 3. So Chapter 3 kind of deals with the fallout of the test that Paul went through with the Gom Jabbar, and now the Reverend Mother, Gaius Helen, she's confronting Jessica on, well, why did you break rank and why did you screw up our plan by having a boy when you were told to have a daughter? And her only response is, it meant so much to the Duke. And then what's interesting about that is the Reverend Mother basically lays right out to Jessica, well, because of this is what, because of your actions, this is what's going to happen. You're going to be on the run. Everyone's going to be out to kill you. You know, your husband's not going to survive. You know, and pretty much that happens. A lot of that happens later on in the book. So it's interesting that the Reverend Mother just lays it all right out for what these are the consequences that you're going to suffer because you put the desires of a duke and over the greater plan, because they wanted to, you know, breed. If they wanted her to have a daughter, so they could breed it with the Harkonnen and, you know, preserve both bloodlines. And then now we get, the Reverend Mother who wants to examine Paul further and discuss his dreams. So Paul discusses his dreams, and so they're seeing signs that he has prescience because he's dreaming about future events that are yet to take place. And Reverend Mother feels that he could be the Kwisatz Haderach. The potential's there for him to be the Kwisatz Haderach, but she's still not totally sold. She's very skeptical that he could be one. And you know, the mother also sees the potential, but she warns you, your mother sees potential in you, but she's seeing it through the eyes of a mother. And then also in this chapter, Paul is starting to see that, you know, the Bene Gesserit are not all, you know, infallible. So it's an interesting chapter. It's it's a shorter one, and but it kind of deals with the Paul, and it kind of illustrates how Paul is already changing because of the Gom Jabbar test. He's no longer as intimidated by the Reverend Mother, and he's also starting to see that, you know, see through her manipulations when, you know, she tries to give him a hint on how to survive the truth-sayer drug, and Paul just thinks it's what she tells him is just nonsense. And so it's an interesting chapter. But what I like about this chapter that kind of points out is a weakness about the Bene Gesserit, and I guess in humanity in general, is you can have a group of people all totally brainwashed, 100% completely into an ideology. And then they can all have a plan set in motion, and they all could be sworn to this plan and their ideology. And, you know, this is how the plan's going to go. And we got to do A, B, C, and D to get to this point, to get our plan working. But because human beings are human beings, because of things like emotion or, you know, not to be rational for a moment, that can cause someone, even the most devoted person in one link in that chain, to drift and break rank and, you know, screw up the plan. So like Jessica did. She had a son for the Duke. She went against all the Bene Gesserit training and all the ideology and the whole plan that so much was hinged on, because she wanted to make the Duke happy, because she wanted to have a son, because she loved him and it meant so much to him. So that's interesting. So she went and defied the Bene Gesserit and did it anyway. And then there's also a bit of arrogance there too, because she thought it was possible. Maybe I could be the mother of the Kwisatz Haderach. So there's that too. And then even at the end of the chapter, when the Gaius Helen leaves, and she's like totally strong and in control and all, but that last second as she's leaving, Jessica sees a tear running down her face. So even though the Bene Gesserit are so in control of everything, their body and their emotions and all this, they still have those moments, human moments, where they slip up and they're weak. So that's an interesting thing that I think this chapter kind of points out. And so that's basically the whole chapter in a nutshell. You know, what's going on. They're basically discussing Paul's dreams and dealing with the after effects of that test, the Gom Jabbar test. So So we get mention of a couple things in here. We get mention the planet of Wallach 9. So Wallach 9 is not really elaborated on. It's just briefly mentioned in Dune, but other books get deeper into it. But basically, Wallach 9 is the home planet of the Bene Gesserit. To simplify terms, that's where their main training facility is and all that kind of thing. And that's basically their home planet. And throughout the Dune books, their home planet kind of changes and stuff. But at this point in time, Wallach 9, that's basically the Bene Gesserit home planet. And not a lot is known about it. They kind of expanded upon it in the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson books. That was once occupied by the Machine Empire, and then it was liberated during the Machine Crusade, and then sometime after that became like the home planet of Bene Gesserit and things like that. So we get Wallach 9 mentioned. So the other thing gets mentioned is Missionaria Protectiva. So what that is basically the Bene Gesserit. So here's the thing. Now I heard this, I don't really know if this is it's not really something I mentioned, or it's not really something I've thought of, or maybe I might have noticed it, but because it's been a while since I read the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson books. And people have pointed out the difference between Frank Herbert, basically a difference in the way the Bene Gesserit are portrayed in the new Dune books and Frank Herbert's books. Is in Frank Herbert's books, Bene Gesserit do not believe in religion. They are not believers of religion, but they use religion as a tool of manipulation. Where in the newer Dune books, they didn't really get that, and they make it that the Bene Gesserit are actual believers in religion. But in Dune, the Bene Gesserit are definitely manipulators of religion. So they know religion is a political tool they can use to manipulate people. So the whole function of the Missionaria Protectiva is it'll go to a planet or go to a civilization, and what they'll do is they'll go in there and they'll hang out with the locals, and they'll absorb their knowledge and get their culture, and and then basically they'll implant a myth, a religious myth. They'll almost like set up a religion in there, so that if a Bene Gesserit ever comes to that planet and gets in trouble or something happens, they can take advantage of that. So that's what it's done. So they've done this to the Fremen. So they've actually went many years before to Arrakis, and they've implanted this whole religion of into the Fremen, so that when a Bene Gesserit goes there, now it's all set up. So if Jessica gets in trouble, she can use that knowledge to basically manipulate the Fremen, her and Paul, as a way for them not to get killed off, and a way to manipulate them as a way to survive. So that's what the Bene Gesserit do. Like the Bene Gesserit, they think in their strategies, or like they think in like generations. Like they're looking way out there in their game plan with things. Like they've really got their bases covered. Like, so that's the whole purpose of that. So when they go back in, they can actually makes it easier for them to set up a religion or put in a ruler or take advantage of the populace, because they've already had a religion set up hundreds of years before. So that's an interesting thing that the Bene Gesserit do, and they use religion as a tool to achieve their end goals. So that's an interesting thing. And apparently Frank Herbert based the Bene Gesserit on Jesuit priests. And they had a similar thing when they wanted to convert a population over to their religion, is they would send in almost like a scout first that would learn everything about the culture, take notes about the culture, learn as much as they could about the ins and outs of the people and their culture and everything, go back and make a report. Then later on down the road, a Jesuit priest would show up, and he would use their own culture to make it easier to convert them over to their religion. So apparently that's what I've heard Frank Herbert based the Bene Gesserit on, in this whole idea of them going around and implanting religions. And now in this chapter, going back to Paul's dreams, there's a lot of things that the more as time goes on, there's more and more things in Dune that I find really interesting. And this whole idea of that Dune deals with is altered states of consciousness and having basically future events revealed to you in a dream. Because there's always been stories, you've always heard stories of people who, hey, I dreamt this, and then something happened later on down the road, like I knew this was going to happen, or when this happened, I remember I dreamed about it before it happened. So that's always interesting. And then whole altered states of consciousness with the use of spice and all that to alter your state of consciousness or to extend your lifespan. Kind of reminds me like when I kind of reminds me, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the drug DMT. There's been documentaries done on it, and it's basically what they use in ayahuasca. So when I learned about DMT and ayahuasca, it reminded me a lot of spice, like how spice can expand your consciousness and how it can give you prescience and all that. It's interesting. So those are two subjects that I'm really interested in, is altered states of consciousness and dream states. And it's something that I wasn't really into when I first read Dune, but it's something I kind of picked up along the way. And it's one of the other things that, that's in Dune that just, in my opinion, for me anyway, personally, makes the book more rich for me, because it deals with these subjects that I'm interested, like these subjects that I'm interested in the real world kind of thing. So that's interesting. And then, as the book goes on, you're going to see Paul's powers of prescience is going to grow more and more and more. But in the beginning, it's just starting off as dreams. He's dreaming about future events, which I think everyone can probably relate to that. I think there's a lot of people, probably more people than they're probably willing to admit, has had a dream at some point in their life. And then, down the road, something very similar in real life happens that gives you like deja vu and it reminds you of a dream you had before. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. So that's an interesting thing about the book. And the other thing is, going back, I've always been interested in about how religion can be used to manipulate people, and how it's been used a lot in the past to manipulate people. And just another one of those. It's just another theme in the book that I think is in there. That you got to be wary of charismatic leaders, but probably be wary of, or be cautious of signing on to an ideology and just following it like totally blindly with just blinders on, even to the point where you lose reason. And you see a lot of that today. Like, people are so, I guess politically, you really see that today. People have really got their heels dug in politically. Like, people are very partisan today, like, to the point where it blinds them, like that, and I don't even really think people consciously realize that this happens, or blinds to the point where they'll overlook their own hypocrisy. And if some situation comes up that, even though they should agree with the situation, but since it goes against their selected ideology, they'd rather, instead of just going with what's right, they'd rather almost make a hypocrite of themselves and try to jump through use a bunch of mental gymnastics to justify it somehow, because that'll keep them in their camp of their belief system, whether it's like a political camp or religious camp or whatever it is. And then where a lot of the people, the higher ups who are at the top of these pyramids of political power and religious power, probably know it's all BS, but realize it's a powerful tool to manipulate people below them. And you see that with like cult leaders and leaders of big powerful churches and things like that. So that's another like theme that's a theme that I don't know, I don't really hear talked about, I guess, when people talk about Dune. They always talk about the aspect of his warning, don't trust charismatic leaders, but probably don't blindly trust an ideology, or don't, get so deep into an ideology that, people can use it against you to manipulate you to do things that are not morally right, I guess. That's something that, I haven't really heard a lot of other people talk about. So that's an interesting idea. So this is not a long chapter. This wasn't too long. It was one of the shorter chapters. The video was only like 15 minutes. So not as much to talk about in this one as some of the previous ones. So I'm going to wrap it up right there. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one.